We do something that people actually try to avoid, but it still happens every single day. Yes, it is an expensive mode of transport, but it is the last resort when you're in trouble. It's where we would, for example, fly something for a rocket launch. These things, they have a little bit of a James Bond glamour with them. Nobody plans to get into an accident or break their leg, but when it happens, you want immediate help. I like to describe it as the ambulance of commercial transport.
When you look at the industry, the air travel industry, and really its poster children, that's passenger and cargo operations, right? And there's a whole spectrum to passenger operations and passenger flights, and a whole spectrum to cargo operations and cargo flights as well. But when you look deeper into cargo, there's a very exciting niche in that, which is OBC, right? And you work very closely with OBC. How would you describe what OBC is today?
I like to describe it as the ambulance of commercial transport. Nobody plans to get into an accident or break their leg, but when it happens, you want immediate help. And that's basically what we do. We do something that people actually try to avoid, but it still happens every single day, multiple times. And when it happens, you want a partner on your side that you can trust, that is reliable, and that is always there around the clock for you. That is OBC.
And how does that differ from regular logistics services and transport services?
The main differentiation between an OBC and a normal courier company, in very obvious colors, is that you have one person that goes to the shipping location, picks up the shipment, immediately moves to the airport, flies to the final destination, clears customs, and then delivers the shipment to the consignee. So you have one is the same person doing the entire movement. Whereas if you go to a big express company, they have thousands of people, 10,000 of people, 100,000, and that is great. The only difference is that you have one person that picks it up, brings it into a sorting facility, it flies to somewhere, it might fly to several different, it gets sorted several times, it changes hands a lot, and then it gets into the delivery truck. And you probably now in today's world, we have GPS tracking, so, he should be here any moment, and then you await him. Whereas, back to the OBC, it's one person. And you can even, if it's necessary, you say, yeah, customs cleared, on the way. It'll take about 45 minutes, depending on the traffic. The courier will inform you if they got stuck in traffic. So you have a very accurate arrival time.
An interesting aspect of that is the spectrum of shipments that can be transported via OBC. And when you look at the different situations and scenarios, you can either have, let's say, an aircraft on ground, AOG situation, where they need a time-critical spare part, or a mechanical item to keep a supply chain running, or a dress that needs to be delivered to a Paris fashion show, right? Looking at those, minute, very small piece of examples, what would you say is the common denominator or common factor that qualifies a shipment to require OBC?
Usually, time is everything. Most of the customers that ship something by OBC, they have a very tight timeline. Let's make an example. Michael, I assume you travel. You like to travel?
Yes.
I assume you are generally cost conscious when it comes to buying your travel.
I try to be.
There you go. Let's assume you have booked a great trip to the Caribbean. You got a fantastic ticket. Very, very cheap. You get a great hotel price. Only problem is ticket is non-refundable. You reach at the airport and you realize you forgot your passport in the hotel in the safety box. Hotel is so far away that you can't make the trip back and forth to still be able to check in. Now imagine you had a service that you could call up now and say, hey, I have my passport in the safety box. Can you bring it to me now? Even though it might cost you 350 euro for a trip that would cost you on Uber or Bolt for a fraction of that. But in that case, you're willing to make this investment because otherwise your whole trip would collapse. Your non-refundable ticket is gone, your hotel bookings, and so on and on and on. So that's where suddenly an OBC comes into play.
An interesting aspect, because as a regular person, I might think of OBC as the James Bond character walking through the airport with a briefcase with $1 million handcuffed to his hand. And that might be the common perception that the regular person might have, which might be different today. Is that the case?
No more. These days are really, really gone. It was very glamorous back then, and yes, couriers would only travel in suits, and yes, they had their handcuffed briefcase. These days are over. Usually a courier is a normal person like you and me, not very obvious that they're traveling. The difference is they might have a shipment with them that weighs 900 kilo, separated on 90 boxes. And they fly on a commercial airline to their destination. So talking of OBC, maybe one interesting thing is many people think, oh, it can only be a certain weight, which is incorrect. We had shipments for several tons, one shipment. Of course, you will have multiple couriers, and you need to break it down into pieces like a large suitcase. Otherwise, it would not qualify for an OBC. But it is possible to have OBC shipments with huge volumes and high weight.
Another aspect as well on an industry level. Now, if you look at the past 5 years or the last 5-year period, we had a situation such as COVID, which completely turned the industry upside down. Now, today, shipping as a service is very reliant on global logistics, on interconnectivity between those different regions. How does OBC navigate, such situations, right? When there's such difficulty or such challenge, what are some of the challenges that you do bump into? What's your approach to that?
Well, you just mentioned COVID. It was possible to fly during that. It was highly complex. Sometimes what I just told you about only one courier doing the entire job, sometimes because of the quarantine regulation, we had to switch to 4 or 5 different couriers. So one courier would fly from one country to another country, give it to another courier, then they would fly to another country, then they would give it, so it would be handed off. And but it was still possible, and it was surprisingly popular in those days. I think in a nutshell, what you can say, that when there is a challenge, we look at it and we see what can be done about it, and we find a solution. That is the strength of a good OBC provider.
What other case studies or examples or experiences have you seen where businesses employ OBC around the world?
A typical situation would be you have an airline that flies tourists, let's say to Greece, to Crete. And upon landing, the ground crew identifies an issue with a part that needs to be replaced. So on Greece, there are no big warehouses that have this part available. So usually that is exactly where an OBC comes into place. The airline will source somewhere in the world where this part is available. Then they would engage somebody like us. We dispatch a courier directly to the warehouse, pick it up, fly it to Crete so that the airplane can go back again. That would be a typical example.
Now, a very interesting aspect of that is that you find that you have the courier who's picking up the shipment from point A, going to point B, and being the individual that's delivering the shipment at point B to your customer. And something that customers might be conscious of, or what they might want assurance of, is security, insurance, compliance. Are you compliant with the different regulations to ensure that this shipment will actually get to me intact as I expect it to be? What are some of your assurances when it comes to that?
That is a very, very good point. And yes, it is very important. And that is what sets a good OBC provider from a not so good OBC provider apart. We take compliance extremely serious. We have insurance. Automatically, every single shipment that we ship is insured. We have a very, very strict compliance team that are breathing down our neck if we do anything wrong, and that goes from the entire spectrum. It starts from knowing our customer. It goes into making sure that all our suppliers are abiding to every sanction and regulation. And of course, it goes for the shipment in itself, it goes to the customs clearance on both ends. When you leave a country, you need to do an exporter clearance, and when you arrive into another country, you need to do an import clearance. And that is all pre-arranged and organized. Otherwise, we would reject the shipment. And that is another point where you can see the difference between a serious and a reputable OBC provider and one that is more on the lax side. Is they would, if they could, if they deem it is not a big issue, they would possibly walk through the Green Channel, which is an absolute no-go if you are professional in this business.
Mm-hmm. Still on that point, especially on being compliant, right, as OBC provider, what stops someone from, let's say, sitting in at their couch on a weekend, and they receive an OBC request and they say, oh, I can transport this from point A to point B, right? What stops them from doing that? And really, how do you then, what are some of the differentiators between the professionals and the amateurs?
Honestly speaking, nothing much stops them. You need a computer, you need some knowledge of how to book a flight. The big difference is when you look deeper into a company, and I personally as a customer would look very, very closely at my provider that provides me with that service. Yeah. And if I have an important shipment that means so much to me and that has a lot of consequences if it goes wrong, I would really, really want to make sure that I'm dealing with a serious customer that's been well established in business, that has a solid background. And how can you differentiate these is look a little bit deeper. I mean, every customer should make their due diligence and their compliance check when they onboard a supplier. And when you see a company that is maybe a one-man show, two-man show, that would be a first big red flag.
Now, still on this topic of compliance, right? Customers and clients want to know that their shipment is transported from point A to B with the best standards. And a very critical part of that is the actual courier taking the shipment from point A to where the client is. What qualities does that courier need to have to qualify as an OBC courier?
That's a very serious topic, yes. All in all, it's relatively simple. You need to have a clean criminal record. You need to be reliable. You need to be available at a moment's notice. And you need to pass our internal screening that we provide that we run through all our suppliers. And then from there, it is relatively simple. So we have a wide range of couriers. We have everything from younger age, where they are still a student, until to retired law enforcement officers. It's everything in there. The most important thing is you need to be super reliable. You need to be, again, ready at a moment's notice.
What does that mean? And I'm going to jump in there, because ready at a moment's notice, right? What's that timeline? Is it ready within 30 minutes to an hour or 24 hours? What's the timeline there?
Great question here. We're talking about literally minutes. So we do have an app similar to a ride-sharing service, if you want to call it that way. All our couriers worldwide are registered with their profiles, and they do have this app on their mobile phone. So when we have a shipment out of a certain location, we will look at the closest couriers in that location, and we will ping a handful of them. And the one that first accepts the job gets the job. And literally, we're talking about minutes, sometimes 30 seconds. And with that knowledge, we know we have a person at that shipping location. Then we can build the offer to the customer. So the customer, when they get a quote from us, they know, okay, they really have a solution there. They have a person there who can take care of our shipment. So the courier needs to be really, really flexible. If you are in a 9-to-5 job, and unless you have a very, very understanding boss that is very flexible, you would be unsuitable for this job. Yeah, because most of the OBC shipments take place within the next 12 to 24 hours. So there is very little planning ahead where you can say, oh, in 5 weeks I'm going to do that.
Automation and AI, you can't bring up tech without talking about automation and AI and their influence on the business, right? Is AI having an influence on the OBC business? Like, is there a way where you're starting to perceive the role of OBC in a different way?
There definitely is. I can't tell you too much as of now. We do look into this very, very seriously. And my strong belief, it is just a matter of time that significant elements of the entire OBC operations, as we know it in today's world, will shift into some sort of an AI environment. It's going to happen. It is very complex again, and that's why probably many people have shied off. And I personally believe this is an irreversible trend. And if you believe that certain things will remain the same as they are right now for the next 10, 20 years, I think you're fooling yourself. Yeah. For some people, it might not be comfortable, but it is reality and we have to deal with it. So far, mankind was able to deal with a lot of things, and I'm sure we also will be able to deal with the increasing AI that is around the corner.
Now, I'm going to bring us to the future today. What are the various different types of trends and innovations that you're seeing today in the business that are influencing, obviously, cargo logistics and global supply chain logistics, and where OBC has an influence as well?
One thing I see is the attempt of decentralization. And in a digital nomad world, I would say, yes, it makes a lot of sense. However, that comes as, at a risk on the compliance side of things. Because if you have a peer-to-peer business model, and where is the authority in the middle that makes sure everything is compliant, everything has been taken care, insurances are there, legally we're safe. So that usually in that aspect has a risk to go overboard. Yeah. So we'll see what happens in that case. A lot of our customers, they are aware that it is maybe more expensive to go to a provider that is set up like we are, but they get a whole different setup. They get a whole different package. And when you look back into the requirements of their customers, those peer-to-peer or decentralized, let's call it community setup, could never satisfy these requirements.
Something that falls, again, within the compliance aspect and regulation aspect, but maybe more from a sustainability perspective, where what are some of the trends of sustainability and eco-friendly practices that you're having to employ in OBC, again, with the rise of global initiatives such as net zero, etc., and carbon zero initiatives? What are some of the sustainability innovations or trends that you're seeing being implemented within the business now?
We've tried to get the interest and the buy-in from our customers many years ago already. And back then the trend was, if it costs more money, nah, rather not. That's why we decided to do it anyway. So since 2023, we offset, and that's a dangerous word. You need to be very, very careful because you cannot neutralize. That's impossible. What happened. But you can offset. You can invest into CO2 avoidance projects. So going back to the point, so since 2023, every single OBC that we do is automatically being offset, and we bear the cost. How we do that is we have a partner that calculates the first mile from the shipping location to the airport. It calculates the weight. It knows which aircraft we're taking, and it calculates the final delivery. So then we have the amount of CO2 that we emitted, and then we have a different partner that allows us to pick from a basket of projects, and that could be anything. In the early stage, we would have e-bikes. We would support e-bikes in Brazil, cooking stoves in Mexico, a biogas project in China, and a solar park in Morocco. So these projects we can change on a yearly basis. What is our aim here is to make sure it is aligned with our ASG Group SDGs. And that is something that comes at zero extra cost to our customer. And we are the only OBC provider so far in the world that is doing that.
With everything that we've been talking about today, one clear aspect is that the OBC business is diverse, right? You will never, or maybe let me not say never, but you will always experience something that is unique to itself, or a project that has a certain unique quality to itself. Just keeping that in mind, what excites you most about the business and where the company is going now?
I think the biggest excitement is the daily challenge. You wake up in the morning, you have no idea how this day pans out. You will be presented with a variety of challenges, and the most satisfying and the most great thing about working in this industry is you provide solutions to your customers, the customers are happy, and the customers thank you. So you did a meaningful thing. And that goes also for our team. I'm very, very blessed to work with a lot of great people that are very passionate, and they're very unique, and we're positioned all over the world. So we have lots of cultures that we build together as one team. And that is another great thing to be thankful to work in this industry.
Now, if a business wanted to get in contact with you, or an individual, how would they do that?
Well, we have a lot of established partnerships. And chances are that if you go to your established regular shipping partner, that in the back end, you will actually be served through one of our couriers, through our system. Our business model is that we work with a lot of freight forwarders, integrators, anyone that is already established in shipping, and through them, we provide our services. Yes, we do have a website, and if somebody is very, very keen, yes, they can contact us there. But usually, our business model of making transactions through a forwarder is a great model, because every single forwarder, technically, yes, they could set up their own OBC department, but it's very complex and it's very cost intensive. And in the end, in that case, it is it makes more sense to outsource to us.
And relationships are such an important part of the business, as you mentioned, with your partners. How do you see that evolving over the next coming years and playing a role with, or in the business?
That is a funny question. I consider myself as a logistic dinosaur. Yeah. In olden days, when I started to work in the shipping business, it was really a lot about relationships. If you would go into a shipping company, everybody would smoke and phones and faxes, no internet, and relationships were the thing, were everything. Now, fast forward to today, the new decision makers often don't even want to reach the phone. They want to do everything online. They want to have a digital approach. At one point, it is possible that you can book your OBC through an app. And this is how things are changing. So the way that these decision makers are evolving, and maybe at one point, the decision maker might even be AI. That is something that could happen down the line. Yeah. So the landscape of how OBCs were booked 20, 30 years ago and now has dramatically changed. As I said, in the past, when I learned about this business, it was literally faxes, phones, and even a telex. I don't know if you know what a telex machine is. It's kind of a typewriter that somebody types something at one point and it comes out at the other side. It's hardly used anymore. And now everything is digital.
What can people look forward to with Chapman Freeborn OBC? And what are you looking forward to in the business?
This is very confidential, of course. We do have the plan to expand our current setup. At the moment, we have operations spaces in 3 parts of the world. That's in Asia, in Hong Kong, in Europe, in Germany, and in the US at the West Coast. We are closely eyeing other markets where we feel that it is beneficial for our customers that we have our own presence there. And again, I don't want to give too much hints right now, but things are in the making.